Guys, is it just to kind of humor me? Is it okay if we do a countdown from 5 with a big enthusiastic yell to start this thing? Is that cool? So guys, let's begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the best Seriously, if you know me personally, then you know I'm being completely sincere with this. I thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. I think a presenter's worst fear is that nobody shows up. Or worse, like only 2 people show up and they sit here and here. And we're having this really weird, awkward conversation back and forth for an hour. So, my name is Matt Thomas. I'm an English teacher. I've been an English teacher for 17 years. I teach mainly English 9 and ELD. Though, like most, how many teachers? Where's our teachers at? Okay, so teachers, we know we kind of teach everything, and then in time we know kind of what our specialty is, things like that. And so this is the best teaching strategies based on neuroscience and behavioral psychology. Like I said, I taught for 17 years, and then I had an opportunity this year to be a coach for my district, an academic coach. And I thought, yeah, let me see how far I can take this. So I'm an academic coach this year. I work in the best district around, Parish Unified School District. I have the best co-workers, and I'm not just saying that because they're in the audience here. So they really are. They're amazing. So I do want to see who's in the room. So let me ask you, how many of you are in here in the capacity or the role as a parent? Like even if you're a teacher, but you're a parent, like just as a parent. You're here just as a parent. That's so cool. Wow, amazing. Where's our paraeducators at? Just parent, okay, awesome. Teachers, I kind of already asked you that. Teachers, so many, that's really cool. Admin, like principals, vice principals, superintendents. Any superintendents here? Counselors, any counselors? Cool, others, like who am I not leaving? Okay, others, okay, cool, just say that. I'm going to tell you this, there's something here for all of you. Because the brain is very consistent when it learns. I mean, unless there's developmental issues, the brain is very consistent. Which means that teaching strategies based on how the brain learns is what I call macro strategies. They'll work no matter who your clientele is, right? If they work in Southern California, they're going to work in Kansas, Florida, China, Singapore, France, Philippines. Because it's all based on how the brain learns, and the brain is very consistent. And so no matter what age you teach, like I teach teenagers mainly, so I might refer to students as teenagers. But if you're an elementary school teacher or a middle school teacher, it doesn't matter. Because the brain is very consistent across the board how it learns. Again, unless there's developmental issues. So this workshop is going to be great for every single one of you because great parenting is really the same as great teaching and vice versa, right? They're no different. Essentially, the way I treat my students, right? It doesn't, when students go home, it doesn't shift to where how they learn as a child and parent, right? It's consistent, and it should be consistent. Here's what I'm going to give you today. So you've got the QR code. It's sprinkled throughout this presentation. So don't feel like that you have to get it right away. You might want to sit there and enjoy for a half hour. And then be like, you know what, I think I'm going to grab this. Maybe enjoy the whole time and grab it at the end. But what I'm going to give you is this slideshow with all the videos that I put in throughout the slideshow. I'm going to give you a link to my YouTube channel that has over 60 videos, best teaching strategies based on neuroscience and behavioral psychology. I'm going to give you this recorded presentation so you don't have to remember anything. Like you don't have to take notes. Like just seriously sit back, enjoy, let the learning happen. And you'll have the recorded presentation, which is being recorded right now. The video camera's on me. I'm telling you that in advance. It's just on me. Because I always hate when I'm in a presentation and the video's in the back. Like, as I'm recording it, it's getting all your head, so don't sneeze. Because you'll be on video doing it. Like, no, it's literally just being on me. I will tell you, too, each of these topics is its own workshop. Which means I do workshops all the time. Each one is like a 20-minute to a half-hour workshop that I've compiled and try to cram everything in an hour and 15 minutes as best I can. This workshop is really designed to answer why and how. Whoa, that's amazing. Thank you for the spotlight. So we know that stress impacts learning, right? We know that. What we're not taught is how it impacts it and why it impacts it. We're just taught that it does. And in education, we need to focus more on the why and how. So when parents ask, hey teacher, why are you doing that? Because I was told that it works. But sometimes what we're taught in education doesn't work. We'll talk about that as we go on. So today it's all going to be a lot of like answering how and why. Let me tell you something about me. I'm very open and transparent and honest. I tell my students this. They know this about me. When I'm presenting, I get tunnel vision. I'm one of those people where like I've memorized a script, right? I'm an introvert at heart. I'm going to talk about that later on. My coworkers can back me up on that. I don't walk around like, hey, what's up? Loud and proud. Not at all. So when I present, I've done this many times, memorized the script, etc. I'm terrible at talking about the amygdala and the impact on learning. And then if someone raises their hand, It's like, hey, what about the angular gyrus and the impact on reading comprehension? I'm terrible at stopping what I'm saying, completely answering that question, and then coming back where I left off. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. So I'm terrible at that. So I'm telling you in advance, I'm just being honest with you. So if you have questions, please, if you don't mind waiting till the end, and then I'll answer all your questions. Seriously, I'll stick around and answer them all. This presentation is going to be more about answers and less about research, because I don't want to bore you guys. I don't want to put you to sleep. Like, hey, here's what happens when we do this and this. Let's open these 3 papers that show it and let's talk about it. No, that's not exciting for anyone. So I'm just going to go rapid fire with the answers. All the presentation will be linked with videos with all the research. And again, we need to know why things are working. So let me tell you a little bit about my history. I think it's important to know so you understand kind of where I'm coming from. Before I became a high school teacher 18 years ago, I owned a business. I owned a kickboxing school. I was a karate instructor. And so being a small business owner, I read a lot of business books, and most business books are all about behavioral psychology, right? How to value your clients, how to make them feel valued, how to motivate them to buy into what you're giving them, how to motivate them to come back to you, how to have them want to come to you, right? Get excited when they leave you to come back the next time. And so I think that teachers, classroom teachers, make really good small business owners, because that's really what we do, right? As teachers, we know this. We have our clients that we have to make sure they feel valued. We have to make sure our clients value what we're teaching them. We don't really have a boss. I mean, if you're a good teacher, admin won't bother you, right? As long as you're a good teacher, right? And they can see what you're doing is valuable. And so when I had my business, it was actually one of my clients that got me into teaching. I had a student named Kevin. He was a very angry teenager. His dad was not in the picture. And so he came one day to class. He was so angry. I'm like, Kevin, what's up? He's a big heavy metal guy. I'm a big heavy metal guy. And he goes, I hate my school. I hate my teachers. I'm like, why? And he goes, they don't get me. And he looks at me and he goes, I wish you were my teacher. You get me. And I'm like, I'm going to be a teacher. And seriously, I swear, that's how it was. So I sold my business, put myself through school, became a high school teacher. And so that was all because of Kevin. And I had immediate success, because what I did was I took what I learned in business, behavioral psychology, implemented it in the classroom. And right away it was successful. I had for 16 years in a row, my students were the top on their test scores in the district. 16 years in a row. Per demographic. No, I swear, I don't tell you that to like brag or anything. I tell you that to show you that we need to learn more about the brain. Because all I did was teach in a way that the brain learns. And I will tell you, I'm not a teach to the test guy. Long-term, there's no studies that support that long-term, sorry guys, I screwed that up. There's no studies that show that test taking is an accurate indicator of IQ, intelligence. Test taking does not equal long-term success and happiness. So I'm not saying teach to the test, because that wasn't what I do. The success that I had was a byproduct of how I taught the students, what they did, their effort, what I did for them. I won multiple teaching awards, including Teacher of the Year. So this stuff here I'm going to show you is not my opinion, right? It's like, hey, this works because I think it works. This is how the brain learns. And this is what we need to talk more about in school. So that's how I got into behavioral psychology. I got into neuroscience because of this girl. This is my daughter. Her name's Sophia. She's 6 years old. And when my wife was pregnant, I knew that I had one shot to be a great dad. I didn't want to screw it up. Because as teachers, we see like students that have challenging, upbringings. I'm like, I don't want to mess this up. I want to be a great dad. So what I did was I read every brain book I can get my hands on for little kids, infants' brains. And I don't remember which one I read, Brain Rules, Wonder Weeks, I don't remember which one, but it introduced me to developmental leaps. And I read it and I was like, okay, week 1, it says this is what's going to happen in your child's brain. Week 3, this is what's going to happen. Week 7, week 32, week 64. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It talks about why tantrums start, how to stop a tantrum, how not to have a tantrum in the first place. And so I went to my wife and I went, this is amazing. These are the answers to the world's most difficult test, how to be a parent. And my wife wasn't as enthusiastic as I was. She's like, great. And I'm like, no, seriously, this is everything. She's like, okay. She's like, highlight it for me. I'm like, okay. So I highlighted everything. I'm like, read this. But then I thought, it made me think, children, unless they're developmental issues, tend to develop very consistently. Week 1, they do this. Week 7, they do that. And so I thought, teenagers tend to have the same thing said about them. They're sometimes rude, they're impulsive, they don't think about consequences. And so I thought, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe they're going through developmental leaps just like kids are. And so I started investigating and researching brains, for teenage brains, developmental stuff, and realized that there's absolutely a reason why teenagers do what they do. Teenagers go through developmental leaps just like infants do, but it's just not as cute when they do it. But they do it, and I'm like, this is amazing. And so you might be asking yourself, you're like, Matt, this is cool. Where are CABE? Like, where's your ELD specific stuff? And I will tell you, everything you learn today is going to be ELD specific. Because ELD students, English learners, kids and teenagers, they're kids and teenagers first before they're language learners, right? Right? They go through the exact same things that native English speakers go through. They have additional language challenges, sure. But we need to understand they're kids and teenagers first. I'll have EL teachers ask me, like, dude, Matt, my students aren't like engaging, they're bored, they're not reading, they're not doing the work. I need some help. And the first thing I do is I ask them, how's your curriculum? And the teachers will go, dude, it's boring. I'm like, there it is. Because ELD students are kids and teenagers first, right? We've got to make it exciting. And so that's the first step we start. We're like, how can we make this stuff exciting? So that's what we're going to focus on today. So really your takeaway, and I'm going to sprinkle these out through all the presentation. Our takeaway is that students go through developmental leaps. So if your students are having consistent issues, there's a reason for it. Sometimes what we want to happen doesn't always happen, right? But they need to go through these developmental leaps because that's how they'll mature and get better and grow and become good adults. Effective teaching strategies that apply to native English speakers also apply to our English learners. Right? Good teaching is good teaching. I just saw this, I thought it was funny. Any dads in here, like you have a daughter, like this is you too? No, just me. Dude, this is me. I'm like, yeah. Any moms in here, back me up. You're like, I'll put on the pinks. Thank you, the two of you. Thank you so much. There, thank you. That's what we do for our kids, right? All right, so throughout this workshop, there'll be times when I'm going to be kind of teachery, and there's times when I'm going to be kind of neuroscience-y. Because, okay, I'm going to be honest, I have to be respectful, I'm a teacher too. But if I'm honest with it, sometimes in education, like, we tend to create our own things sometimes. Like, hey, this teaching strategy works. And you're like, really, explain how? And you're like, because I heard it at a workshop. Because it worked, I think it worked for my friend, so do this. Neuroscience is like, good teachers, you gotta look at this. Do this, this, and this. Don't do this, this, and this. That's what neuroscientists will say. They understand the brain. Teachers are like, tell us how to do it. Neuroscientists will say, you're the teachers, you figure it out. We don't talk enough. We need to talk more. So there's going to be some things that I'm going to tell you. This is, based on neuroscience that it goes against what we're taught in education. Because sometimes we do make up our own stuff because it sounds good. Theoretically, this sounds great. Unfortunately, it doesn't line up with how the brain learns. Let's talk about one: learning styles. Teachers, we know, how many workshops have we sat in where we have our visual learners, kinesthetic, and our audio learners? How many of you know what I'm talking about? Like, dude, we sat in, of course. And we need to teach. We need to identify their learning style and teach that way. However, learning styles don't exist. Neuroscientists have known that forever. Teachers never got the memo. They just forgot to tell us. We're like, hey, learning styles. Now, learning modalities do exist. Learning intelligences do exist. If you play an instrument, you probably have a stronger musical learning intelligence than others. That's fair. That's a thing. But learning styles don't. Now you're like, dude, who cares? It doesn't really matter. But it matters if we keep telling our students, you're a visual learner, you can't learn when I lecture. And the students believe that. So every time we start lecturing, they're like, no, I'm a visual learner. That's bad. And so let me give you an example. I'm going to tell you a lot of real examples because I'm a big believer in like not making stuff up. This really happened, I swear. So I'm in a meeting. The person next to me is trying to explain information to the person in charge of the meeting. The guy goes, I'm a visual learner, I need to see the graph. He's not a visual learner, but graphs are meant to be seen, right? It's a graph, it's meant to be seen. Plays are meant to be watched. They're a play, it's not meant to be read. That's why teaching Romeo and Juliet in a textbook is tough, because it's meant to be watched. Actions are meant to be done, kinesthetic learning. My dad's a mechanic, he was a mechanic, not for a living, he just loved to work on cars. If he were to sit me down and say, son, let me explain how an oil change is done, I'd be like, huh? But he needs to show me how to do it, right? Kinesthetic, that's an action. Stories are meant to be heard. So if I were to tell you the story about the first date I went on with my wife, and she was so nervous, she grabbed my thumb and pulled me. She's like, come on. And she dislocated my thumb. I don't need to show you a picture of it, right? I'm a visual learner. I need to see a picture. No. Stories are meant to be told. But it's an example, it shows like there's things sometimes we perpetuate when we teach in education that doesn't line up with how the brain learns. How many of us, okay, so you're not going to believe me, but I'll say why in a few minutes. I'm an introvert. How many of you are like me? I like to call them observers. I sit in the back when I come into a workshop. How many of you are like me? You're an observer. Okay, cool. And guess what? It's okay to be an observer. How many of you are like, dude, I don't mind speaking, I'm good. Like, I'll tell the answer every time. How many of you are extroverts? Good. That's how you learn best. That's great. Now, teachers, you can back me up on this. We've been to many workshops where we're told that we cannot let students hide in the back. Equity sticks, equity cards, whatever you want to call them. I was at a workshop a month ago in Long Beach, right? My fellow presenters there as well. There was a teacher, I sat on one of her workshops, there was a teacher that was very proud of how she never lets her students stay quiet. She will sit there and she's telling a story about a girl who was so shy and timid. And she's like, nope, I asked her a question, she wouldn't respond. I stood there and waited for 15 minutes until she responded. I went, what? But I wasn't going to be like, dude, wait, seriously, you need to come to my presentation without half hour. I wasn't going to say that. But here's the thing. Equity sticks sometimes force our students, who are introverts, it forces them to talk. They don't learn well that way. I'm going to talk about the amygdala in a few minutes. But some of us are observers. That's how we learn. So how many of us have, as teachers, we have students that always raise their hand when we ask a question. It's the same student every time. We have one of those, right? And we're told, right? We're told to say like, Joey, can you hold off and let someone else answer? Joe, if we do that, Joey shuts down and he's not learning the rest of the day. And I'll talk about why in a second. If a student does not raise his hand, he or she's quiet, that he's an observer. It's okay not to call on him. If someone's always raising their hand, that's so cool because you always have someone to respond. It's not wrong to go, okay, let me scan the room. Joey, please, thank you. It's not wrong to look for someone else first. But we want to let our introverts be introverts because when we think introverts, we think shy. Some of it, I'm not shy, I just like to observe. That's how I learn. So let our observers be observers. Let our extroverts answer the question. That's how they learn best, because if you don't let them answer the question, it shuts them down. We'll talk about why, because I'm a big believer in why. She's smiling. She's like, yay. Anyway, our takeaway is this. Not all teaching strategies are supported by how the brain learns. If your child's feeling frustrated about something, there's a reason why. Usually it's how something is taught, right? Information needs to be taught in a way that matches its purpose. If you have info that you want to show via a graph, you got to show that graph. If you're teaching Romeo and Juliet, you got to watch the play. It's a play. Not every person has to speak out to learn. Some students do, so let them speak out. It's okay to let your observer be an observer. And teachers, it's okay to not use equity sticks. Because when a student comes in and they know this is the word, when teachers like, who am I going to pick on? And we know teachers that do that. And right away, our students, the audience, start freaking out. You guys know popcorn reading? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. Who's going to read next? No! So while they're reading for comprehension. They're reading for pronunciation, not comprehension. They don't understand what they're reading. But it sounds good theoretically. I make all my students read, so they're all engaged, and blah, blah. If your person's third in front, they're now reading ahead 3 paragraphs to see which one. Right, we understand. We know that stuff. Parents and educators need to question why things are being taught in a certain way. And I'll be honest, teachers, I get it. We don't always know why. We're just told this is a great strategy. We come to these workshops and people are like, this is great. And you're like, yeah, it sounds good. But we have to understand why it works, because some of them don't work. There needs to be more focus on neuroeducation, which is education that lines up with how the brain learns. Fortunately, we're going to that shift now, aren't we? Like, it takes a while. But it used to be just me on these workshops. Now there's like 2 of us, 3 of us. Where is she? Oh my gosh, Alicia, where are you? The amazing presentation I just sat in, she was here. She did neuroscience stuff too right before I came in. That's amazing stuff. So we need to focus more on that. Now, okay, before we get into more strategies, we have to take a step back, and there's 2 parts of the brain I need you guys to know about. One's the frontal lobe. This pretty much answers all your questions about teenagers. So the frontal lobe is the last part of the brain to develop. It's in the very front, obviously. When a person's a teenager, it's only 80% mature. And the wiring is the thinnest at that time. The frontal lobe is important for planning, critical thinking, and consequences. How many of you have ever asked your son or daughter, dude, seriously, what were you thinking? Or something along those lines. Okay, cool. Of those people that raised their hand, how many of you got this response? I promise you they don't know. Because their frontal lobe isn't fully developed. Here's the thing though, how we react, whether we're parents, or teachers, how we react is so important. It sets up how they're going to respond to us later in life. If we ask them, what were you thinking? And they're like, I don't know. Don't tell me that! You know exactly what you're thinking. You know now they're getting yelled at and they're getting a lecture. And so now they're starting to learn. Is it on this slide? It's not, but I'll tell you the story anyway. Now they're starting to learn how to cope and adapt. My wife has a friend, more of an acquaintance. They're not friends. More of an acquaintance. The acquaintance has 2 daughters, wonderful children, 2nd grade and 5th grade. They lie about everything. They are the sweetest kids. They lie about everything because their parents yell at them all the time. They make a mess, they get yelled at. They tip something over, they touch the expensive silverware, they get yelled at. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. I can only imagine what would happen if they broke a glass. And we know parents like that, right? The kids who are the sweetest kids lie about everything because it's their coping mechanism, right? So if we're yelling at our students, at our kids, or whatever, for things that they don't even know why they can't answer, they're going to try to figure out how, okay, I need to start lying. I need to start saying what mom and dad want to hear because I don't want them to get yelled at us. Versus like, hey, all right, I understand why you did it. You weren't thinking about this at the time. I get that. Let's have a talk about this. Let me explain. And we have to be careful not to turn everything into a lecture too. Because kids don't like to get lectured. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the frontal lobe, which is in charge of planning, critical thinking, consequences, organization, analysis. Where's our English teachers at? Thank you, the 3 of us. All right. So the 3 of us, when our students write essays, the most challenging thing is analysis because they're 9th graders. I mean, you're like, no, I teach 11th grade, whatever. But you get the idea. Right? That's a part of the brain isn't really developed yet. So we can focus more on format and stuff, hope that they get analysis as it goes on, teach them as best we can, but understand when their analysis might not be as deep. Attention span, right? The whole they should know better. They don't know better yet. They should. They're 13, right? Their frontal lobe isn't developed. So the frontal lobe, when does it develop? Mid-20s to early 30s. Fully develops, fully matures. That's why if you're like me and you went back to college in your later years, it's a little bit easier. Right? Because our brains are fully developed. We can think of long-term analysis. All right, so frontal lobe, we have to understand that answers most of our teenage questions. And amygdala, let's talk about that. The amygdala is in charge of regulating emotions and decoding memories. So there's 2 things, frontal lobe, amygdala. If the amygdala gets threatened, right? The amygdala's job is really to look out and be like, all right, look for threats. When the amygdala gets impacted or overreacted, new learning can't happen. It just can't. And so what happens is this. It processes fearful and threatening stimuli. It controls aggression. That's why some people fly off the handle a little bit easier. The amygdala participates in decision making. That's a very important part for our kids. The thing is, though, it will adapt its behavior to change in environment. Meaning, okay, teachers. Let me back up. Let me say this way. Parents, the way you read an email from a teacher is going to be in the voice of the teachers that you're used to participating or talking with. So let me say it this way. If you're used to teachers that are jerks, and in the past you've been like, your son or daughter was playing around, they need to blah, blah, blah. That's how you're going to read the email. That's the voice you're going to read it in because of your amygdala. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right? Sorry, am I saying? So here's the thing, teachers, this is what I always do. Make video messages once a week for your parents. Record yourself on like Canvas or whatever you have, right? Just record it. Hey guys, Matt Thomas here, son or daughter's English teacher. Just want to let you know this week we're working on Romeo and Juliet. Here's how I'm going to teach it. We're only going to do it over 4 days because I don't want to bore them to death. What we're going to do is we're going to do blah, 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 right? Next week we'll start our essay. Here's exactly what I want from them. Blah, et cetera, et cetera. 2-minute videos. That way they hear my voice. So when they do get an email from me, which they never do, I always do videos anyway. They do get an email, they hear it in my voice. If their son or daughter comes home and the parent's like, hey, why do you have a 0? Oh my gosh, it's Mr. Thomas's fault. He did not grade my stuff. He's such a jerk. The parents are like, you know what? He told me that, et cetera, whatever it is. He seems actually kind of a cool guy. So send video emails once a week telling your parents exactly what you're doing in class, how you're grading, and try to smile on your video. I'm Mrs. Johnson. Your son or daughter. Like, don't do that. Because right away, right, amygdala. And principals, let me tell you, if you walk into a class and the teacher shudders, it's not a good thing. Because their experience with you might not always be productive and happy and open, right? And so we want to calm our students' amygdalas. We're going to talk about that. The amygdala, people will go like, yeah, isn't that the fight, flight, or freeze thing? Yeah, it's a very simplified thing. It does a lot of things. And again, if the amygdala is overactive, it will not decode learning to memory. So if a student comes into your class that just got yelled at by the previous teacher, even if it was justified, whatever, new learning is going to be very difficult to happen. True story, I'll tell you this. My second year teaching, I have 2 rules in my class. One, don't talk when I'm talking. The other, just be nice to each other. That's my 2 rules. One day, I'm speaking in class about whatever. It doesn't matter, Romeo and Juliet, whatever. Joe, that's his name, turns around and starts talking. I look at him like, Joe, dude, you know the rules. Like, don't talk in my class. He was like, I saw that look on his eyes. My second year teaching, I went back to talking, and I'm one of those, how many of you have a voice in your head while you're doing something, talking to you? Okay, yeah, 3 of us, that's me too. Right now it's talking to me like, quit looking like an idiot, just move on. But as I'm presenting, I love that sport. Yeah, you look like an idiot, move on. No. So as I'm presenting, I'm telling myself, dude, you were a jerk, you need to apologize. So I stopped class and said, guys, I'm so sorry. I turned and said, Joe, I'm so sorry I was a jerk, I had no reason to do that. You're such a good guy, like it was my fault, are we cool? And he's like, yeah, he was so surprised. And then I went back and started talking to the class and teaching. That was so important because it calmed his amygdala. Because now he's not like, eh. And what it did is it showed all the other students that it's okay that I made a mistake. And when I make mistakes, I apologize. Which means, guess what they're gonna do? When they make mistakes, they know it's okay to apologize. Because what we do is we adapt to change in environment. That's why students will act one way to you and another way to teachers as well. Amygdala fully matures at 17 years old, which is pretty cool, but it's usually based on the 17 years of prior experience. Think of our students that have very challenging home lives. They bring that into the class. And the second we do this, their amygdala goes, what? And it's hyperactive. So we want to create that calming environment, which we'll talk later on how to do. So takeaway, there are things in education that our students really are asked to do, but their brains aren't ready for it yet. You know our state content standards? There's things that their students' brains aren't ready for yet. Writing analysis, right? As a 9th grade teacher, I'm not going to grade my students on how well their analysis is yet. More format and effort on analysis, because I understand they're not fully developed yet. The brain likes structure and patterns. So if your son or daughter asks you a question, why? Some parents, it's so easy to go, because I said so. The brain likes patterns and structure. Explain to him or her why. Be consistent with how you treat them as well. Hopefully you treat them well. The brains have to figure it out. Here's the thing with math. Math is so challenging for many reasons. One is the brain likes to figure out why things are not done, not just how to do it. I'm going to talk a little bit later on why math is one of the first things our brains forget. Teachers and parents really need to have patience and forgiveness because our students do have overactive amygdalas and it will impact their learning. So we do have to be able to have patience and forget. And sometimes adults can forget what it's like to be a kid, right? The one thing is consistent, we were all kids. Our kids aren't all adults yet, right? We're teaching to be great adults. They're just not there yet. All right, so let's talk about the 2 big, so we've got frontal lobe and amygdala. I'm gonna make references to those all throughout. Let's talk about the 2 biggest influences on our son or daughter's academic success. So my friend, Tim, true story, was hired as assistant principal in a school in San Diego. And he goes, Matt, can you come in and do some workshops for my staff? And I'm like, yeah, what do you want? And he said, tell me, what's the one thing that makes the biggest impact on student achievement? And I'm like, curiosity and interest. There's no close second. We are born with an innate curiosity. We have to be curious to grow and develop. We stick our fingers in our hands and our mouth because we're curious. We roll over because we're curious. We crawl because we're curious. We walk because we're curious. We tell our son or daughter, don't look in that closet. They look in the closet because they're curious. Hopefully you're all here because you're curious. Yes. Curiosity leads to interest. You get in the door because you're curious, you stay because you're interested. Hopefully you were forced to be here, but either way, thank you for being here. Whatever reason you're here, thank you for doing that. But the thing is it starts with curiosity, which can lead to interest. It doesn't lead to interest to everything. So if you want your son or daughter to play football, and they don't want to play football, pushing them into it isn't going to help. Right? Curiosity leads to interest. Interest leads to motivation. That's intrinsic learning, isn't it? Teachers, we all know, parents, we all know, we said in workshops, you guys need to make our students have intrinsic learning. It's not how it works. We can influence it, hopefully, but if they are curious and interested, they'll teach themselves. That's how we pretty much all got to where we are today. And so that's the first and foremost thing. And I said that to my friend, like, dude, curiosity, interest leads to motivation, that's it. And he goes, cool. He goes, I was thinking more of like total teacher efficacy in the PLC process. I'm like, dude, that's a you thing. Kids don't care. He's an assistant principal. I'm like, the students don't care about civil teacher efficacy. There's no interest or curiosity with it. And I'll be honest, teachers don't care much either because teachers want to know how we can support Johnny in third period. That's what we want, right? Because parents, your kids are our clients. We want to take care of them. We want to make them feel valued. We want to make them see what we're teaching is powerful. And so you can see how there's a disconnect sometimes. And parents, most of us, if you're not in the teacher jargon, like total teacher efficacy in the PLC process, we don't even know what that means. So there's a disconnect. So admin, if your teachers aren't buying into what you want to teach, what you want to share, there's probably a lack of curiosity and interest. It doesn't mean you don't push it. It means we have to find a way to get our teachers curious about it. Teachers, if our students are not interested in what we're doing, we need to spark curiosity. I've done entire workshops on this. These underlying things are links to videos. Whenever you see that, click that video, it'll give you a whole workshop on creating curiosity. Parents, if our children are not really buying into what we want, there's a lack of curiosity and interest. It's not your fault. We're born that way. We're like Lady Gaga. Right? The three of you. Seriously? I don't even think I've heard the song. I just know that's the title of it. But here's the thing. So it's good for us as parents to support that interest. If our child wants to play violin, dude, go for it. Maybe curiosity is there. Maybe it leads to something, maybe it doesn't. But it could lead to interest. And the thing is it's okay to let them try different things. And don't get frustrated if they try dance and don't want to do it. Okay, you want to try golf? Don't want to do it? Okay, cool. They're trying, right? The curiosity. I had a student, true story, named Scott. He got a D in my class. He was failing all the other classes. How many of you teachers, like you have a student that fails everything but gets a D in your class at least? Props to you, right? They're motivated by you. Sometimes the motivation is just that they like you. It is, right? Curiosity, interest, they don't want to disappoint you. They're motivated. Let me go back to motivation for a second, right? Okay. Your son or daughter, I'll show you motivation. So your son or daughter's room isn't clean. And you're like, hey, can you clean your room? Your daughter's like, no, I don't want to do it. $20, I'll give you $20 if it's cleaned within 10 minutes. Motivation, you get the idea, right? Motivation. So interest can happen at any age. Going back to Scott, he had a D in my class, but an F in every other class. He was a 10th grader. By the time he came back as a senior, he comes back to me and he goes, Mr. Thomas, I'm sorry I didn't work hard in your class. I'm like, that's cool, no, you're a good guy. He goes, no, seriously, I didn't do well in school now. I have a B average in everything. I'm like, that's awesome. What changed? He goes, golf. He goes, I found golf. He goes, I love it. To be on the golf team, I have to have a C average. I just get a B so my mom doesn't ride me. But golf was his interest. Okay. Interest can happen at any age. Interest is why me as an introvert is standing in front of 150 people and talking and speaking, because I love this stuff. I didn't find interest in neuroscience until my daughter was born. So, parents, if your child isn't doing well in class, it's probably because there's a lack of interest somewhere, right? Or with anything, there's something that you want to promote. We have to try and find that curiosity and interest. Parents, you might have to be the go-between between teachers who do not teach very engaging and do not make things interesting. You might have to be that go-between to try to create that interest. There's links to workshops on how to do that. So that's the first thing. Interest and curiosity leads to motivation. We're born that way. This is our way of developing. So the second question, what will keep our students motivated? Once they find it interesting, what keeps it going? Enjoyment with achievement. This is how our brain continues doing what we do. Let me show you something. I'll be back on this. So Dr. Scott Boland really is credited for explaining this. We have the highest concentration of endorphin receptors in the learning part of our brain. So the endorphins are what makes us feel good, right? We get that runner's high, we're done working out, we're like, this is great. Those are endorphins. The highest concentration of those is in the learning center of the brain, which means when we learn, it makes us feel good. And when we get those endorphins, we get dopamine. I'm going to talk about dopamine later. Dopamine is addictive, which means we are born addicted to learning. Some of you are going to be like, no, my son is not addicted. Let me prove it to you. So I'm going to get back to this picture. Video game designers know this. They hire neuroscientists, they hire behavioral psychologists. They make the levels engaging, level 1, but not too difficult. Then comes level 2, then comes level 3, etc., etc., etc. They do enjoy learning. It just isn't always what we want them to learn. But that doesn't matter. The brain doesn't know that. It's just they enjoy learning. So if we want our students to continue doing something with success, they need to enjoy what they're doing, but feel like they're getting better at it. That ties into lesson planning. Now, how many of you, just to show off, how many of you guys play an instrument? Just show you guys off. That's awesome. It's so good. So here's generally what happens, right? If you play guitar and you're like, this is pretty good. Imagine playing the same song for a year. You're done after a while. Because there's a high correlation between familiarity, how well we know something, and how much pleasure we get out of it. As teachers, we want to take our students to this point. This is the learning arc. So if we were to teach our students something, we have pre-algebra, right? And I'm going in talking about calculus, which I don't know anything about. My students would have no familiarity, they'd have no interest. If my students are algebra students and I'm like, 1 + 1 is 2. And they're like, seriously, we already know that, we're bored to death. We know, and parents, you know this too if you've done birthday parties. There's a time where our students start to get wiggly, our kids start to get wiggly. That's when we need to switch to something else. We're going to talk about that in the lesson planning part there. But as teachers, we want to make sure lessons are fun and interesting because video game designers know this. Social media designers know this. We're competing with that because they follow how the brain learns. Parents, if we want our students or children to do something, we want to try and make doable and progressively more challenging tasks. Hey son, my dad's a construction guy. I've been a construction guy forever. Hey son, we're going to build a house today. Start with the roof. And I'm like, what? No, we need to start with progressive, more doable. Let's start with the foundation. Now let's build and build and build, right? When we ask our son or daughter to do chores, make them simple. At 4 years old, maybe they take the trash out. And please don't forget to thank them. Because when I acknowledge our students and children for something that we want them to do, it tells them that it's okay to do it. I don't know if I said that right. Let me repeat that. So if we're like, hey, Joey, do me a favor. Do you mind picking that trash up? Thank you so much. I know you didn't drop it, but you mind? Thank you so much. Now, every time Joey sees a piece of trash, he remembers me thanking him. He gets dopamine. Dopamine's addictive. He likes that. So he picks up the next piece of trash whether I'm there or not. Hey, dude, seriously, I appreciate that you didn't lie to me. Like, I'm so thankful. Thank you so much for that. Usually, how many of you have teachers, you have students that tell you everything? Well, you guys, cool. They probably don't tell to all the teachers. They tell it to you because they know that you say thank you and they enjoy your class. Right? So it's important to make sure you acknowledge what students do so they continue doing it. I think that's the biggest thing, that one of the biggest mistakes teachers can make. When someone answers a question, they don't acknowledge it. Hey guys, what do you think Gatsby was thinking when he blah, 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 whatever? Joey, please, thank you. And then Joey says something like, dude, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Now the way I responded with, dude, that's awesome. He gets dopamine because I acknowledged him in front of everybody. But what it does is now everybody sees the way I react to Joey. Everybody knows it's okay to talk in my class. They know that when I raise their hand, I'm going to be like, dude, seriously, thank you so much. I don't just say, hey, Joey, what was he doing? Good, and walk away. I give them something in return. Does this all make sense? I'm jumping around. I talk about this later, but this is a good, perfect time. So, parents, it's good to break lessons down. If a teacher doesn't do it, you kind of are that stopgap. Breaking lessons down into more doable portions. I have a whole video on this. So enjoyment with achievement. We want our students to enjoy what they're doing and feel like they're getting better at it. So that leads us to lesson planning. So I call this the learning arc. If you Google learning arc, it's not going to come up like this. But when we plan lessons as teachers and as parents when we're planning projects, we want to try to take our students to this point where they're learning, they're good, but then we're like, okay, we got it, and we're starting to get bored, then switch to something else. Now, when I owned a martial arts school, anyone that did it full-time knew, you teach adults for fun, you teach kids to pay your rent. Because we have a lot of kids that we teach, right? And if you can't teach kids well, you're out of business. And so what I learned very quickly is with kids, you got to teach them something and switch every 10 minutes. Not totally different, but the same subject just in multiple different ways, right? So I might start with kicks. I might show them like some air kicks for 10 minutes. Then I bring out a balloon and they kick a balloon for 10 minutes. Then I bring out the big punch, the big heavy bag, and they kick the bag for 10 minutes. And then we do scenario training, right? Someone grabs you, the kid pushes away and kicks them for 10 minutes, right? So we're doing kicks, we're just doing different ways. So as teachers, right, we want to kind of lesson plan that way. And as parents, we want to think of doing something that way where we're switching. If you ever notice when you're going over your kids' homework and they get that like glazed eyes, it's time to take a break or to switch. It's usually every 15 minutes. So I'm going to go over this quickly because this is, if I were in a room full of teachers, this is what we talk about for a half hour. But parents, I'm going to give you a little insight of how I suggest teachers do their lesson planning. And that'll help you going, if my son or daughter is not appreciating their class or learning well in the class, I wonder if it has something to do with lesson planning. But when you're the first part, the most important part of learning is interest, right? We got to create interest. And so I tell them, the teachers, we need to create starters. We need to have some type of starters. And it's got to be fun and engaging starters. And so there's a lot of different ways to do it that I won't go into, right? Unless this was a teaching workshop, I would. But usually it's creating interest like with storytelling, right? I tell some interesting story. I ask them a question that's called, developing prior knowledge, quick writes. Now I'm going to show you one way that I like to do it, and bear with me. I kind of have a stupid sense of humor, which you maybe have noticed. But here's the thing. So as a teacher, as an English teacher, I'm a big believer, if I want my students to analyze poetry properly, we need to know what was going on in the poet's life at the time, and even before. Because if you don't know, like, you can't analyze the poetry properly. We do Poe in 9th grade, and Poe had Poe had a really up and down life. How many of you guys know the poem, The Raven, and Annabelle Lee? Those, okay, good. All right, so if you don't understand what happened in Poe's life, you won't be able to analyze The Raven properly. Some people think The Raven is something totally different than it really is. So what I do with my students every month or so to create interest in whatever new unit we're doing, I play stupid games, and they're dumb, I'll admit to it. But listen to what I'll do. I'll ask Joey, hey Joey, or whoever the student is, do me a favor, drop the lights. The students are like, ooh, something cool's gonna happen. Dopamine, now I got them. And so then I say, let's play the newest game of Sweeping the Nation, and I project this. And the students all yell out, like, they go, Price is Right, Wheel of Fortune. They all yell out the name of the game. Now, it's stupid and it's long, that's just how my imagination works. But what I do is I say, hey, I'm gonna show you what happened in Edgar Allan Poe's life. And it's always engaging, so I always ask the students, like, if I say something cool, be like, yay. If I say something bad, be like, oh. So I'm gonna ask, if you guys don't mind, could you do that for me, please? So here we go. So if I go, Poe's born in 1809, giving his parents in the world an incredible author. Yay! Awesome, that's so cool, thank you. Poe's parents died 3 years later. Aww. Gosh. Poe's adopted by a rich family. Yay! That's amazing. His adopted parents disown him. Oh gosh. Before they disown him, they send him to a great college. Yay! With only enough money to cover a third of the expenses. And this goes on for like 20 slides. The point is, right, your students, you're coming, you just get burned out by math, and I'm like, hey Joey, drop the lights. You're like, ooh, something cool's about to happen. And we do this stupid, interesting type, it sparks interest. I'm going to show you one more that's, again, really lame. But what I do is, I'm a big believer in, so I do poetry, sorry guys. I'm a big believer in poetry. I grew up in a writer's household. And the thing is, most of our students hate poetry, you have to listen to music right afterwards. Or during, sometimes. And there's a disconnect there, because music, songwriting is the most popular form of poetry. There's no close second. So English teachers, we know that, right? So when I teach poetry, I teach it with rap lyrics. I do figures of language that way. My students write songs, they write raps, all this stuff. Because rap is poetry. And so when we're doing this songwriting unit, like before class, I'll be like, okay, drop the lights, and I'll put this game up, and they'll say the name of the game, and it's really lame. But what I'll do is I'll use rebus puzzles, and I'll say this. I'll say, guys, okay, what type of music does this picture represent? And the students will say, rock, yeah, perfect, awesome. The next one's a little more challenging. I should probably put it at the end. But if you didn't like, it is rock, sorry. If you didn't like that rock, what about this rock? Oh my gosh, alternative rock. Yes, that's amazing, that's so cool. What about this one? 90s, you gotta. It's rap. Yes, thank you so much. See how stupid it gets? Yeah, pop, awesome, there we go. These get dumber and dumber as they go on. Blues, all right, perfect, you get the idea. And this really does go on, I know how, all right. And they're just to show how stupid this gets. Okay, this gets really dumb, please, anyone. Orchestra, oh my gosh. It is. It is right, you get the, okay, you see, all right. So, my point being is, this is what I'll do with my students because it sparks interest. This is what we do the first 3 to 5 to 7 minutes in class. This is what happens when you press the wrong button. All right. Then we have our interest going, right? Boom, the students are off their phones and ready. Then as teachers, we do some middler with 10 to 12 things to set up the main. Notes, lectures, etc. If we had more time, I'd go into specifically. But then the main part of the lesson is what they go home and tell their parents they did. And the main part, it sets up their main, and then ultimately we finish something and close class out. Right? That's how proper lesson planning should be, because that's how the brain learns and refocuses. Now, people will say, like, oh, my kids get distracted. Technically, there's no such thing as a distraction. It's our brain focusing to something else. Does that make sense? So it's not that they're distracted or they're just focusing on something else. We want to keep them back to us. So if I were teaching properly, if I were saying this to teachers, I would put this all together like this. Every class needs to start with something interesting. And then set up for the main, like don't maybe have them take notes before going into what you're talking about, and then finishing something with class. So if I'm teaching autobiographical writing, I might have like an interesting story about how I got jumped outside of Carl's Jr. by 3 people when I was 16. And then I tell them that story. And then I have them take notes on autobiographical narrative writing. And then I have them write a story, probably connected with something emotional that happened to them, etc., that they learned something from. Then if we had time, I ask them to share out. I don't force them to, I ask them for volunteers. That lets class flow. You don't want to do like a middler all period. You don't want to do a quick write for 25 minutes. And after 7, your kids are bored. Because the learning arc, right? And so that's how proper lesson planning goes. Now let me give you a real life example. So here's my wife, kind of bright in here. They say, people that do this for a living say, always show a picture of your family. That way the audience can't hate you. They connect with you somehow. I'm like, okay. So there's a picture of my family. But anyway, so let me give you a real world example. So my wife is a middle school math teacher, and the way she teaches is different than the way I teach, right? Because she's a little more structured. I'm a little more out there. My wife hybrid homeschools my daughter right now. Half at home, half at school. And so when my wife does homeschool, she has the structure, she has the desk, she has everything lined up for that quiet environment for my daughter to work. Here's how I do homeschool. I come home, get into house clothes, right? Like, yeah, I'll do this work. We get on the couch, we open the couch up, I put my arm around my daughter. That's how I do the homeschool. Yeah. It's not at the desk. When I notice my daughter starts to lose it, I say, hey, do me a favor, finish this sentence, we'll take a break. Breaks to us are getting snacks or playing chase. Because a break isn't like, okay, you do your thing and I'll do my thing. Then I'm going to take you away from your thing so that I can start class again. No, we do it together. We take the break together. But both are important because my daughter needs a safe, quiet place to work. But we also need to take a break every now and then. And it's okay to change environment. Last presentation I did was in Long Beach. I had a parent afterwards say, hey, Matt, I need some help. I need to get my son doing his homework. He's not doing his homework. We fight for an hour over it every night. And I'm like, dude, how old's your son? And she goes, 7. I'm like, who is assigning homework at 7? Teachers, don't assign homework. There are no long-term studies that support that homework is important, except for math. 20 minutes of math is okay. Because math is prone to synaptic pruning. We're going to talk about that next. But please stop assigning homework. It's not that important. And so we talked, and it's 7 years old and he's doing homework. And the parents said, yeah, he always wants to do it in his room. He says, can I do it in my room and I'll do it? But it's like, no, I put him at the desk. Structure. And I went, no. He wants to let him go to his room and do it. So she let him go to his room. She emailed me, she's like, hey, he's actually doing his homework. I'm like, cool. So our takeaway is biggest influences on student success. Get them curious. That could lead to interest, which leads to motivation. Enjoyment with achievement. When students enjoy what they're doing, they feel like they're getting better at it, they're more apt to continue doing it. We are born with an innate desire for and an enjoyment for learning. Our brain does refocus quickly, so switching things up or taking breaks is effective, and it's okay to do that. If you're trying to get your children to do homework and you're both frustrated, take a break. It's okay to do that, and have fun with them during the break. Changing environment is okay. Let them do their homework in their room, outside. As long as they're doing it, it's okay. So, that being said, let's get into creating the effective learning environment. This is what's going to go back to the amygdala. Okay, so teenagers model adult behavior. It starts when they're younger, right? Kids model adult behavior as well. But what happens is this. So, if they're like, dude, why are teens always so rude? They're not meaning to. Let me explain. Teenagers model adult behavior. And so a teenage ideology is that you give me respect. Give me respect, I'll give the respect back to you, right? Is that fair to say, teenager? You give me respect first, I'll give it back to you. The adult says, no, I'm the adult. You need to give me respect first, I'll give it back to you. If you look at them side by side, it's the exact same argument, right? Because teenagers model adult behaviors. We're not teaching our teenagers to be good teenagers. They're already teenagers. We're teaching them to be good adults. Right? If you have a 5-year-old, you're teaching your 5-year-old to be a good 9-year-old. And at 9, you're teaching them to be a good teenager, a good adult, because they'll model adult behavior. And so mirror neurons are why teenagers act the way they do. If we give them respect first, if we know that as teachers, and we're like, okay, if we have the same ideology, I'm going to use that to my advantage. I'm going to respect my students. So teachers, saying please and thank you to them. Parents, please and thank you goes a long way. right? Ask him for, hey, Joey, do me a favor, do you mind turning the lights out? Rather than, Joey, turn the lights out, right? Rather than demanding, ask, request, because they feel good when they do stuff for us. Let me give you a perfect example. So, all right, husband and wife, both are working, come home, tired. Husband sits on the couch. Wife says, hey, dear, can you take the trash out? Husband goes, I'm so tired, I'll do it later. Teenage daughter sees that. Mom says, hey, daughter, clean your room. Daughter says, no, I'm tired, I'll do it later. Oh, no, you won't. You'll do that right now. Don't talk back to me. Teenager's confused. Because the teen sees how adults communicate with each other. The teen's trying to be a good adult. Now, this is all subconscious, of course. If there's a lot of yelling going on in the house, husband yells at the wife and vice versa, now the teenager thinks to defend herself, she needs to yell. Don't talk back to me. I'm not talking back to you. Oh, yes, you are. Go to your room. And then she slams the door, whatever. Teenagers will model adult behavior. So, as parents, we go, oh boy, we really have to be careful how we talk to our spouses, how we talk to our kids, because it's a model that. As teachers, we have to understand there's 36 individual people that come from individual environments. But because of mirror neurons, the way we treat our students, they will mirror it back to us. Mirror neurons are the reason why when I yawn, many of you are going to yawn too. Because I said the word yawn, some of you are fighting back that yawn right now. It's mirror neurons. That's why, have you ever noticed that like some people hang out, whether they act a certain way, and then when they go with another group, they act differently? Mirror neurons. So, as teachers, we need to say more please and thank you. As parents, my daughter, right, she's in public, she goes to school 3 days a week at a hybrid homeschool, and she'll say things and I'm like, we don't say that in our household. So I'll be like, to my daughter, I'm like, hey, I know you meant that to be funny, but, and then I'll explain why it wasn't funny. First is, don't be saying that, blah, blah, blah. This is the time when I would have talked about my wife's acquaintance who their children lies. They have to figure that out, right? So we as teachers and parents need to be able to respond well to our students to set up communication with them, right? We don't always want to give a lecture because then our kids will stop telling us stuff because they'll react to how we treat them. So, true story, I'm doing this workshop. This was a 25-minute workshop in front of a bunch of teachers, and a teacher came up to me and she goes, Matt, she goes, you just explained my relationship with my stepdaughter. My stepdaughter's so rude to me. I now realize that's exactly how I talk to my husband and I talk to her. She came back a week later, she goes, Matt, my husband and I talked about like how we talk to our stepdaughter, we totally like changed it. Things are better. I'm like, cool, right? So we have to create that environment of respect, respecting our students. We will get that respect. Now keep in mind, some students may take a little bit longer because the adults in that student's life all yells at them, makes them feel terrible. They come into our class, it's not just going to take a week of being kind to them to get them on our side. It may take a week, a month, a semester, a year. So if you have students that maybe you've written 3 referrals on, I promise you he or she gets 10 in another class. Right? They respect you more. How many of you teach seniors and you have students that like ditch all the time except for your class? They actually show up for your class even though they have like a 12%? If they do, that's a good thing, right? So the first step to creating an environment, you got to respect who you're working with. You got to respect your kids. Got to show that respect to your students. The second thing is calming their amygdala. We talked about this a lot before, so I'll go over this really quickly. But if our students come in sensing threat, if a teacher, and teachers we know who like the tough teachers are, right? The ones who always yell at their kids. I promise you those students are coming in like, oh, I hate this teacher. I don't want to get yelled at. They're not ready to learn. How come the teachers that are more like, tend to have the worst grades with their students? It's rhetorical. We know why, right? Their students they don't want to learn. When the amygdala gets overactive, new memory new sensory memory can't come in. Therefore, our students aren't learning. Parents and pairs, we want to try to create that calming environment. Pairs, you're the go-between. When you have that teacher that's just like, you're kind of the one that has to calm that student's amygdala down. Here's the thing too, parents and teachers, we both should do this more. Smile when your students come in. Like in the eyes. Wait, that's weird. Don't smile in their eyes. When they come in, make eye contact. Be like, Joey! When someone comes in and feels like wanted, they're more apt to pay attention. Hey Joey, good seeing you. Well, my daughter, every time, this is not just me faking it, I legitimately feel this way. Every time my daughter sees me or my daughter walks in the room or I come home, my eyes light up. Hey! And she runs and jumps in my arms. Because what happens is she knows she's going to get that reaction every single time. That's dopamine. Dopamine's addictive. Imagine if every time you came into the room and someone looked at you and went, hey, you're gonna like that. That's what our kids want. That's what our students want. Now, some of you, how many of you are stand at the door teachers? You said, that's amazing, that's amazing. Now, I will tell you, that doesn't fit my personality. I'm not. I stand in front, and when they come in, I talk to them. Hey, what's up? Oh, a nice baseball shirt. Standing at the door doesn't fit my personality. For those who stand at the door, staying inside doesn't fit your personality. They're both good, though. Because so someone's like, you need to stand at the door. Not if it doesn't fit your personality. But we do want to acknowledge our students, acknowledge our kids. Can you imagine every time coming in a room, not getting acknowledged? Every time your kid came in and you're like, I'm watching TV or something. Change it. Every time that person comes in, Joey, what's up? Oh my gosh! You know, like their eyes will light up. They're going to pay attention for you better. Create that environment of respect. Reinforce that good behavior. When someone does something well, show them. Dude, thank you so much for like giving your chair for that other person. Because if you don't reinforce it, you're telling them what you want them to repeat. Hey Joey, thanks for not talking when I started. That was so cool. Thanks for doing that. That reinforces positive behavior. It tells the people what you want them to do. Anytime you see something good, tell them. So step one, create an environment of respect. Calm the students' amygdala so they're ready to come to your class, ready to learn. Number 3, creating dopamine with our students and our children. We want to have, as teachers, we want to have engaging lessons to where the students will get excited to come to class. Now here's the thing, dopamine is often thought of as the feel-good hormone. It's not wrong, it's just really incomplete. It's the anticipation hormone. When we're anticipating such great things, we get a shot of dopamine. Kids, Christmas is coming up, dopamine. Adults, like vacation's coming up, yay, happy Friday, dopamine. Oh my gosh, this guy's doing a great seminar at 11:30, yay, dopamine, right? But the point is, teachers, imagine this. Imagine, so every day, Joey's sitting in second period going, oh, this sucks. Ooh, Mrs. Johnson, third period. That's what we want. Because now they come into our class excited to learn. Their amygdala's calm. They know they're going to get respect. Probably you're the only class that respects them, right? That shows them that respect. Hopefully not. But they feel it from you, right? So we want that dopamine. If your son or daughter has too little dopamine, motivation gets low, depression gets low. Right? Every time your son or daughter walks in the door, you're like, Joey! They're like, that's not my name. No. But give them a hug, right? Dopamine. Finally, teachers, I'm talking to you specifically. Our students get dopamine, we need to create dopamine as teachers. We need to make every single lesson your favorite lesson. Now, before I go do math, that's impossible. I swear to you, 95% of my lessons, 5% we have to give the test, right? 95% of my lessons were my favorite. Because I needed to teach in a way that was fun for me. Imagine teachers, Sunday night, you're like, dude, my students are going to love this. My students are going to love this stupid music thing I'm going to do. It's going to be awesome, right? That's amazing. Rather than, oh, Sunday night, Monday, oh, shoot. I need to teach insert whatever. Teachers, admin, you got to support your teachers having fun when they teach. Teachers, find a way to lesson plan to make it fun for you. That means you're going to have dopamine. Your students are going to love it. They're going to have dopamine because you're a great teacher. They're going to look forward to you. It's going to be a calm environment. Classroom management is going to be so easy. Students will pay attention more. You're going to have a longer career because you actually enjoy teaching, because you enjoy what you teach and how you teach it. The class will go faster. You guys have ever had time fly? It's because of that dopamine release constantly going through your brain. The way we conceptualize time is different. We don't think about it, and we just flow. Speaking of time, I don't have my phone. It's usually recording. Does someone mind yelling the time out for me? 12:28. So we got 2 minutes. Yeah? Okay. So here's the takeaway. Create the environment you want. Calm that amygdala. Have your students get enjoyable lesson plans, and teachers teach to have fun. Now, this is the last and final thing I'm going to talk about, because I have so much more, but time-wise, but I swear I'm going to go quickly with this. This is important to know, how our brain learns. So, when we learn something new, we have a tree branch growing in our head. That's my analogy. A neural pathway. How many of you knew that already? Okay, cool, the 2 of us. All right, so when you learn something new, you get a new neural pathway. Now, because some of you already knew it, it's strong in your head. It's been reinforced. Here's the thing, though. When we teach our students something, they're not going to remember most of what we teach them. Because when we teach something new and they get a new tree branch, just like a new tree branch, we got to water it to have it grow. There's this thing that's called synaptic pruning. The brain will repurpose things that it learns if it doesn't find it important. That's why math is one of the most difficult things that a student can learn, Because the brain, the vocab is so specific to a subject. The brain will say, that's not that important. And so let's go ahead and repurpose it. Math teachers, it's not your fault. It's the brain doing it. And we can't control what the brain finds important sometimes. We can't say, hey, students, this is important. The brain's like, whatever. We can't. So as teachers, we need to understand that. So what we need to do is teach fewer concepts, more opportunities to learn them. Essentially, not just slow down, just teach fewer things. The brain will remember the knowledge if we connect it to something the students already know, prior knowledge. And we create real-world applications. Yeah, remember when Hamilton came out 10 years ago? It was like all the kids were rapping and doing poetry. It's awesome, right? Connecting to something. So here's what I'm going to say. We have like 2 minutes. This is what I love. Sorry? Dude, seriously? Thank you so much. Remember I told you that I go tunnel vision? That's so cool. We got 15. All right. Awesome. But now I'm like, holy crap, we have 15 minutes. I better hurry up. Okay. So when we teach something to our students, right, we need to make sure that what we want them to learn, we stay in their brain. And we do that by reinforcing what we want, fewer concepts, more opportunities to learn it, connected with things they already know. And so that's why when I teach poetry, I do a lot of music, I do a lot of rap, I do poetry slams, which are rap battles. It's just not a cool way to say rap battle. Do poetry slam outside. Like, it's not. But it's the same thing. Show them real-world relevance. How many of you had a job before you became a teacher? You had another career. Okay, cool. Bring that career in the classroom. I talk about business owning a lot. I'm like, dude, and I show the students how to own a business, right? But half of all people have owned a business in their life, yet we don't teach them that in school. So bring that into the classroom. So takeaway, right? Students will not remember everything we teach. So we need to teach fewer concepts, more opportunities to learn them. Create curiosity. That's the first step to everything. Get our students curious. Connect what the kids are learning to what they already know, real world scenarios, and constantly repeat what we want them to know. Now, I'm going to go really quickly on this stuff because I want to get into reading and I want to get into second languages and how they're learned because that's really important. I'm going to just gloss over this fast. The way memories are created, generally, connecting things, like our senses grab everything. Right now, your senses have grabbed everything in this room and asked your brain if it's important to remember. And the hippocampus either said yes or no. That's why we all see each other. We're not going to remember what each other wore. Because our brain goes, that's stupid. Why would you care what the person in the third row is wearing? But here's the thing in class. Hey guys, we're going to do all of chapter 4. The brain's like, this is stupid. Why do you want to remember all that? So we need to teach fewer concepts, more opportunities. That's what Finland and Singapore's entire model of education is based on. Very, very effective teaching strategies. And if you've ever noticed, if you hear that song, you go to the grocery store and you hear the song, you're like, damn, first kiss, middle school. Every memory you had to that song connects because we remember things that are emotional. You're like, dude, that was a terrible first kiss. Like, he missed. It was terrible. But every time you hear that song, it brings back memories, right? So the way we remember things is we connect them to things that are important. For adults, we have memory markers. We tend to how old's my daughter? Oh yeah, we moved the time. Okay, we tend to do that, right? With our students too, we have to understand they'll remember things based on emotion. I mean, if we're yelling at them all the time, they're going to remember that. They're not going to listen to us. If we're nice to them, like, oh, that was a great teacher. We usually hear that. And so we need to spotlight the information. Teachers, if you're teaching all of chapter 4, spotlight the really important parts of it. If I'm teaching Romeo and Juliet, they all know they both die at the end. I'm focusing on the main parts, right? Soliloquy, metaphor, those things. And then my assessment is not a test. I have them write their own Shakespearean play, and they have to present it in class. And it's amazing. And they don't have to speak Shakespeare. They can do whatever they want, and it's great. They remember that because I focus on fewer concepts. I hope I didn't press the wrong button again. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Yay! All right, so our takeaway. Our students will not remember most of what we teach them. So they will only remember things that their brain finds important. So spotlight that information, connect it to things that they already know, right? Connect it to something emotional. If we're always yelling at our kids, that's what they're going to remember about us. That doesn't mean you can't get on. If your students respect you, your children respect you, it's okay to get on. Like, dude, don't do that, because they know you respect them. If your students are curious about something, they're going to start learning themselves, right? So let's get it. That being said, let's get into second languages, because I switched it last time. I want to talk about this before we get into reading, and that'll finish us up. So, I mean, our audience, right, are English learners. We have a lot of English learners in our class. We have to understand this about languages, how they're learned in the brain. If a person learns a second language from the age of 7 or beyond, generally, it becomes memorized words or phrases. It's part of it. It's a different part of the brain. Even if you're fluent. So one of my coworkers, Spanish teacher, started learning Spanish at like 18. He's fluent. He still speaks memorized words and phrases. Which means if I were to learn Spanish now, right? My professor's like, okay, hello. I'm like, hello. Hello means hola. Okay, I memorize that. Hello, hola. Okay. When someone says hola, you say, hola, ¿cómo estás? Because I know I'm trained to do that, right? Memorizing words and phrases. Bien, y tú? Okay, gracias. Muy bien. I switched that around. Darn it. You get the idea? And so our English learners are memorizing words and phrases. So when we are asked what and where questions, those are easy. What is the capital of New York? It's Albany, right? New York City. I don't think it is. Okay, so our students, when they're asked what and where questions, because everything's based on memorized words and phrases, those are much easier for them to respond to. The challenge is when we're asked how and why questions. Because those you can't memorize the words for. You have to now figure things out. So if you teach EL 1 and 2, that's the newcomers, right? That's challenging because you're having to develop that language. But they're still saying it based on memorized words and phrases. When we do EL 3s and 4s, if we're teaching science, our EL 3s can memorize the what questions. What is this? What's the definition of mitosis, right? But when we ask our ELs, how did you come to that? Why do you think that concept is blah, blah, blah? That's tough because they've never been taught that before. So as teachers, we need to understand that. And we need to understand because they have to now construct a language or an answer that they were never taught, hoping that they have all the words to do it with. Do you know English has 170,000 words? Spanish has half that. My wife's Filipino. Tagalog has 30,000 words. So imagine this. So my wife, who speaks English fluently because they teach in the Philippines, let's say I'm in class. Let's say I'm an art teacher, and I want my students to use the word majestic. And I'm like, explain that. And you have an EL student from Philippines who speaks Tagalog. Majestic is not in Tagalog. Majestic's in Spanish, right? It's easy if the word aligns up. It's much easier. Majestic is not in Tagalog. So now what happens is our EL students, if we're asking them to say a word that they don't have in their original language, they now have to come up with an entirely new concept in their mind of what that is. How can you define majestic if you don't have a word in your language that equates to it? So your students, my Filipino student might say, pretty, right? The word that's the closest that they think. Majestic can mean pretty, but it maybe. If you're brought up with a word and a concept in your mind, you know it's like, I know what you mean even though you're not saying it. But the art teacher might go, majestic doesn't mean pretty. Oh, you get a D. You didn't use the right words. But we have to understand that a Thai student, Thai has 3,000 words. Your EL students that are Thai, oh my gosh, they're having to try to conceptualize so many new words. So as teachers, I'm a big believer in grading based on intent. So we have a student that's doing everything they can, writing the words. I'm like, look, you're not using the exact words I'm looking for, but I think you know what I'm talking about. If you're a science teacher and you're asking your EL student to explain a concept and you're like, those aren't the exact words, but you know what? I think you know what you're talking about. They still can earn the same A everybody else can earn, right? Is that fair? Especially if we have, let's say you have a student where if they were responding in their native language, they would get the answer right. If you're like, look, you speak Thai, and you tell me in Thai, go ahead. And they're like, what? Like, no, seriously. If they're like saying stuff, you're like, yeah, it's pretty good. Now, they can think you're like, you're an idiot, right? They can say whatever, but the point is, it's not wrong to have your students respond to their native language using translation tools and then giving you the answer, especially if it's written out, right? It's not wrong to do that. And so I'm a big believer in focus on the knowledge of the content, not the knowledge of the language. Because we want equality for our students and their grading. Now we all understand that. We're at CABE, right? Generally like-minded. I wish all of our other teachers understood that too. Because there are A students, I know a story, you might have read it was in like Edu Weekly or whatever magazine we all get, right? It was in one of those where a student from Taiwan, valedictorian, right? A student, came to the US, didn't speak a lick of English, failed all her classes. Got in fights because some girls were messing around and making fun of her accent, she got into a fight. Now she's labeled one of those kind of students. She was going to go on to be a doctor, she flunked out of school. I don't remember the rest of the story, I forgot the story. But the point is like some of our students are like that. So it's okay to grade based on intent, right? It's okay to use translation tools and let them, speak it. We guys know Google Docs has that speak thing, right? Yeah. Speak it, and so what if the English is a little off, right? They're learning. They still should get graded based on the knowledge of their content, not the knowledge of the language. So, guys, if you guys don't mind time? 5 minutes, cool, thank you. I'm gonna go fast. Okay, why is reading so difficult? First of all, the question is when we go, like our students aren't reading, they're texting, right? They're reading the captions on TikTok. They're not reading what we want them to read. Is that fair? Like we can say that? Okay, so let's look at this way. So I have videos why reading is difficult. Now I'm gonna show you, reading is difficult for everyone. I'll explain why. Most teachers don't know what we're about to learn. So 1 in 5 adults are illiterate, 12% of adults are proficient readers. Only 31% of college graduates read at a proficient level. Granted, that was from 20 years ago, but I don't think the data's changed much. Over half of all adults read at a 6th grade level or below. So before we go, dude, that's terrible, we could go, well, maybe there's a reason for that. Now before we go, wait. Reading levels are plummeting, aren't they? Now I'll be honest with you, these scores came out before COVID, and COVID has changed, it has really impacted a lot. But I'm gonna show you guys something. If something is a certain way, there's always a reason why. Reading scores are pretty much level, because the brain's very consistent, right? Throughout the world, the brain is very consistent. Reading scores have always been where they're at. They're very consistent, very level. And so we ask ourselves, there's probably a reason why. Now I'm going to explain something with you. I'm going to show you why reading is so difficult. We are not born, not only with the ability to read, the capability to read. There's no part of the brain that specializes in reading. We are born, unless there's a developmental issue, with a very strong established system for language, right? We're born like crying. We're born with a very strong visual, network for vision, the occipital lobe. When you get hit in the back of the head, you see stars, because it's back here. We are not born with any ability to read. There's no network created for reading. So what happens is the language network and the vision network make a baby. That's it. And they create the visual word form area. It makes stuff, we've adapted to read. There's no part of the brain that reads, that specializes in reading. Here's the thing, we haven't evolved. It needs to be created in every child every time they're born. Which is why you kindergartner teachers, you see some children have adapted their reading brains because their parents have supported that. Others have no reading network created. For whatever reason, right? They didn't know. So that's why reading is so difficult. So if you're wondering why can't my son or daughter read well, literally, teachers, you can say, sorry, Johnny's mom, your son isn't reading well because the circuitry between his language system and his visual system has not been developed yet. And that's the right answer. Because there's no circuitry. We literally have to create a new network. How many of you knew that, just to show you guys off? Cool. Most don't. If teachers knew that, they'd be like, ooh. Yeah. Elementary school teachers, you guys are the heroes. Because you're creating, like for me, I teach 9th grade. Like your hard work makes my job easier. Parents, you're the first steps of this. Now imagine this, there's no reading network. We're literally making this up as we go along. But academic tests are based on reading and writing. Teachers may not get an accurate indicator of what our students really know. If our students could tell us stuff, they would do well. But the second we say, write it down, it's like, ugh, because of structure, right? So, best way to teach reading. It means it takes a lot. Phonics have been shown to be the best way to teach reading. But I did a whole 2-hour video on the reality of the science of reading. So I have those links there for you. Parents, here's what you can do. Multiple studies have been done on this at home. Speak to your child from the womb. Speak to your child so they get those sounds. When your child babbles, respond positively to it. Read to your child while holding him or her to create that positive memory. Speak a lot. Don't just tell a kid to be quiet. Speak a lot to him. That's going to build that confidence. Starting with that will make teachers' jobs so much easier. Because in kindergarten, the teacher is like, all right, the students will probably have started to read already. So here's what we need to do, and I know we're short on time. So here's what I'm going to ask you. If you would like, so here's my contact info. There's my work email. There's my home email. Here's a link. You're going to get a link to all my videos. There's my YouTube channel. If you'd like to subscribe, that'd be amazing. Thank you so much. It has all my videos. Sorry, that was from my last presentation. There's not a QR code. I will thank you so much for being here. If you want me to come out to your district and talk, then I can create workshops for you specifically. My district is very good at lending me out. So I'm very open for that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Feel free to hang out if you have questions. Or if you just want to hang out. We won't let the next guy go. Thank you guys so much.